Steve Kim is an apologist from Vancouver, British Columbia, where he lives with his wife and 2 children. He holds a master's degree in Christian apologetics through Biola University and currently works with Apologetics Canada, where he has been teaching apologetics for 3 years. Steve believes that what we believe about God, the world, and ourselves inevitably affects how we live. He works to bring the message, think clearly and live passionately, to people all across Canada. Please welcome Steve Kim.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Greetings from the factory to all of you over at the fire hall and the warehouse and all the way up there in Churchill. It's good to be all here together. Trust me, I'm there with you in spirit. Just a disclaimer to get us started. I'm going to be giving you a lot of information, as my director and my friend Andy Steiger likes to say, bring it hot and heavy, and so that's what's going to happen here. So, within the short 40 minutes or so that I have with you, I can only whet your appetite. So, there are a couple of resources that I would like to bring your attention to. This is a 5-part video series called the Thinking Series. It's a video discussion tool that anybody can use to host a conversation about life's 5 biggest questions, such as, what's the meaning of life? Does God exist? Do all religions lead to God? So on and so forth. We've hosted the Thinking Series anywhere from coffee shops to churches to prisons. So we like to say that Andy actually went to jail for it. And I understand that we are actually all out of DVDs, but you can go to our website and order the digital download for $20. So you can go to apologeticscanada.com/store, and you should be able to find it there. And this is the companion book that goes with it. You can read it as a standalone book. It's called Thinking, Answering Life's 5 Biggest Questions, written by Andy Steiger. We published it in-house. And this is a really accessible book that delves a little deeper into the 5 questions addressed in the Thinking series. It's available for $14 in the back. Some people buy multiple copies and just give them away because it's so readable. So if you buy 5 copies or more, there's a bulk discount, $10 per copy. So that's available for you at the back. We also have a weekly podcast where it's about half an hour long, each episode, and we talk about current events and some cultural trends from our perspective, from a Christian perspective. So if you like to listen to stuff during your commute, then you can certainly subscribe to that. You can find us on iTunes, just type in Apologetics Canada and you'll see it there. Now, with that infomercial out of the way, by the way, we don't make a dime from all of this. All the proceeds go directly to the ministry. So I wish I made money off of this, but I do not. So today's topic is morality. Without God, who gets to say what's right or wrong? Let me start by telling you a little story. Nanasan ichibutai. Nanasan ichibutai. I'm not speaking in tongues. I'm not that charismatic. I come from a Mennonite church. When I think about World War II, Nazi Germany is pretty prevalent in my World War II vocabulary, but probably not as much as Imperial Japan. If you're a history buff, you probably know that Korea was annexed by Japan in 1910 and was under its colonial rule for the next 35 years until the end of World War II. My grandmother and grandfather, they were born right during the Japanese colonial period, so I grew up hearing all these stories about how they were treated as second-class citizens. There are some pretty heart-wrenching stories there, so this is very close to my heart. Now, Nanasan Ichibutai, Unit 731, was a biochemical research unit based in Harbin, China during World War II, under the leadership of Surgeon General Shiro Ishii. That's the man that you see on the screen there. And they used to carry out all kinds of really horrendous experiments. So for example, they would line up prisoners, fire a rifle to see how many they could penetrate. Or they would take a living human being without any anesthesia just cut him open to see how organs worked while the person was still alive. And this one really gets to me. A story is told of a room, all made of metal inside, and the researchers would throw a young mother with her infant son in there. It's all made of metal. They lock them in there, and they start heating up the room. At first, the mother feels the warmth under her feet, gets hotter and hotter. Blisters start forming on the sole of her feet. You can't go anywhere. It's all made of metal. Everything inside that room is hot. So what the researchers wanted to see, apparently, was at what point is the motherly instinct going to be taken over by her survival instinct, such that she'll throw her baby on the floor and step on it to survive. Now, I've known a number of Japanese people. This is not to, call them evil in any way. This is just part of the World War history. A war is a messy thing. So if there are any Japanese people in here, please don't take any offense. I've known a number of Japanese people, and they're truly lovely people. And in fact, I'd like to get to know you more. But this is what our governments have done in the past. Here's the thing. If you were to ask Surgeon General Shiro Ishii, he would have probably told you that this was a good thing, right? He's serving the emperor. But if you were to ask Koreans, the Chinese, or Westerners that were in that camp, they probably would have said, no, this is wrong, this is evil. So here's my question. Without God, is morality objective or subjective? That is to say, is there an intended way things ought to be such that what Unit 731 did is actually wrong and evil? Or is morality whatever we make of it? So that what Unit 731 did was only wrong for the victims? I think there's an implicit question underneath these questions, and that is, what kind of a thing is morality? Is it the kind of a thing that can exist outside of God? So we can rephrase the question this way. Without God, does objective morality exist? Without God, does objective morality exist? That is to say, this is the kind of morality that's valid and binding regardless of your opinion. Even if the Nazis had won World War II and convinced everybody that the Holocaust was a good thing, it would still be evil and wrong. So without God, does objective morality like that exist? So here's the roadmap for today. What I want to do is I want to try to demonstrate to you that something very much like God is necessary in order for us to have objective morality. I will do this in two ways. First, we're going to take a look at objective morality externally and internally, and I'll explain what that means as we go along. And then I'm going to take a look at atheism and see whether atheism can make sense of objective morality. Any Jimmy Fallon fans out there? Yeah, quite a few hands going up. Yeah, I don't watch Jimmy Fallon a whole lot, but every now and then I watch something, and there are some gems there that I can glean from him. And this is one of them. This is called Wheel of Impressions. You might have seen that before, where they press a button, and a name of a celebrity comes up, and a topic comes up, and you're supposed to take turns impersonating that celebrity talking about that topic. So, here it is.
Here we go. My turn. You want to press it? All right. Michael Caine talking about candy corn.
Oh. Michael Caine. You got the little pieces of the candy corn, the yellow, the orange yellow one. You got the candy with the corn there. You all got the taste. Sometimes they're shaped like little pumpkins. They're not even candy corn.
Thank you. Saving me with the bell. Can't do Michael Caine. I can do Michael Caine.
That's what.
Michael Caine, we asked him once, how do you go about choosing a movie? And he said, well, what I do is I sit in a nice, comfortable chair, and I read the script they want me to consider. I read the first page, and then I read the last page, and if the part they want me to play is on both pages, I do the picture. That's how you do it right there.
I think Kevin Spacey went up to Jimmy Fallon on this one, right? Would you agree? Okay. If you just answered my question at all, I'd like to ask you another question. How did you make that judgment? Right? You probably had some kind of a mental image of Michael Caine, right, with his accent and all his idiosyncrasies. And insofar as one of their impersonations matched more closely to the person of Michael Caine, you probably judged that one to be the better impersonation, right? Now, what would happen if Michael Caine were missing? Could we tell which one did a better job at impersonating Michael Caine? No, we couldn't make any sense whatsoever. So what we did just now is we just appealed to an external standard, a standard that is outside of both Kevin Spacey and Jimmy Fallon. It's the same way with morality. When we say helping the poor is good and killing Yazdis for being a religious minority group is evil, we are implicitly appealing to some kind of a standard by which we make those value judgments. So what's the standard? Is it just personal preference, group preference, utility, reason, or is it God? Whatever you do, you have to found morality on something. It has to be grounded. Okay? You have to pin morality on something. Otherwise, we couldn't make any moral pronouncements against anybody whatsoever. Just as we can't make any value judgments on which one did the better impersonating without Michael Caine. So that's the first thing we need. Externally, we need a transcendent standard. So then let's look at this internally. Internally, what do we need in order for us to have objective morality? I would say that we need at least three things. One is objective moral value, objective moral duty, and objective moral accountability, aka justice. Okay, why do we need these things? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a negative case. What I mean by that is this. Because we're all intuitively aware of the objective moral realm in our moral experience, let's see what would happen if we removed any one of these components and then see what happens to our morality. Ready for this? This part is a little bit more dense than others, so stick with me here. Value. Moral value has to do with good and evil. What if good and evil were missing in our morality? Everything would be just a matter of duty and obligation. Okay, are there things that we do that's neither good or evil, but we do it simply out of duty and obligation? Now, I'm assuming that most of you drove here, right? What side of the road did you drive on? Oh, come on, this is really disturbing. You should say this really. Right, okay. So you have earned your driver's license. That is good to know. In Canada, we drive on the right side of the road. That is good. Now, let me ask you another question. Driving on the right side of the road as opposed to the left, is that in itself good or evil? No, it's morally neutral. Now, but if you were to do that in the UK, now you're doing something wrong, right? But driving on this one side of the road as opposed to the other, in and of itself is morally neutral. That's what happens when value is missing. Now, let's think about this. Torturing a little baby for fun. We would all agree that this is an evil thing, yes? Yes. Good, thank you. Thank you for that affirmation. I still have hope in humanity. That's awesome. Now, if moral value were missing, torturing a little baby for fun would be neither good or evil, and if we can't do it, it's simply because we're not permitted to do so. In fact, if we were obligated to torture a little baby for fun, that would be the right thing to do. In the same way that driving on the right side of the road is the right thing to do in Canada. But this is absurd. We all know that torturing a little baby for fun is evil. So that's what happens when moral value is missing. What about moral duty? Duty has to do with right and wrong. And duty is, simply put, something that you owe. And what would happen if duty were missing? This is a little technical. Stay with me here. If duty were missing, the difference between good and evil is reduced to the difference between red and blue, A or B. Right? There's no compulsion. It's just all preference. You can do either. When you have two exact same cars, okay, and one's red and one's blue, and you want to buy one, whichever color you pick, it's just your preference. In the same way, if we take right and wrong out of our morality, all that our morality gets reduced down to is just preference. Good and evil, in a sense, gets rendered useless. It's all description, no prescription, no ought. That's what happens when duty is missing. What about accountability or justice? Let's imagine a court. Okay? The court summons Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa. And the judge says, okay, you two, for everything that you have done to the world and for the world, I'll give you 30 years in prison. Let's take it a step farther. What if the judge said, Mother Teresa, life in prison, Adolf Hitler, you can go scot-free? Surely we could call that court immoral, corrupt. There's something wrong here. So when justice is missing, our morality starts crumbling down. Now, I know this is a lot of stuff, so again, you can just take it at your own pace later, bit by bit. So if this is a little bit overwhelming for you, don't worry, that happens. So now you've probably noticed that in that slide, there's that foundation piece there that's blank. Each of these three things, value, duty, and justice, they require one thing, and that is personhood. We need personal moral agents. Let me explain that to you. Value. Why do we need personal moral agents? Why do we need personhood for value? Back home, I have a friend, Eric. He's philosophically very astute. He's a big fan of Plato. Talking with him sometimes can be very challenging because he's the kind of guy, once you let him talk, it's really hard to get in. But I love him for it. He pulled out his iPhone 5. See, we were talking about this whole value thing, so he pulled out his iPhone 5, and he said, okay, let's do this. What is this phone worth to you? And I'm like, you want to do this with a Korean? Are you kidding me? $100, I'd drive a hard bargain, right? And he goes, what was this worth when it first came out? And I said, well, without a contract, maybe $1,000. And then he said, okay, let's think about this in a different way, from a different angle. Let's say there's this iPhone 5, but there's nobody in the world. What is this worth now? A big fat nothing, right? See, value requires valuer. Without person's value doesn't make any sense. It is a person concept. What about duty? Like I said earlier, duty is something you owe, and you only owe things to other persons, right? This table doesn't owe me anything. Okay, I don't owe anything to that monitor there. But if I were to borrow a book from you, sir, then I would owe it to return it to you, yes? So you only owe things to other people. So we need personhood for duty. How about accountability? Well, in order to reward or punish the person, you need access to that person, right, who did something good or bad. So you need personhood for that. So let me illustrate this whole personhood thing in this way. Let's say there's a car parked on a hill. Sorry. Somehow the brakes malfunction, and this car rolls down the hill, hits a toddler, and the toddler gets killed. Now the grieving mother report this to the police, and the police, upon investigation, discover that the mechanic who had serviced the car the day before the incident had knowingly used faulty parts to save money. So the police arrest the mechanic, and the grieving mother, even though this life will never be the same again, she takes a small measure of comfort knowing that the person responsible for this has been arrested. So let me ask you this question. Do we hold, what was the direct cause of the toddler's death? The car hitting the child. But do we hold the car responsible? No, obviously not. We hold the mechanic responsible because he's the personal moral agent responsible for this. I mean, this is obvious to us, right? I mean, the car was just working according to physics, just gravity. It's just blind physics. But that mechanic, he's blameworthy for this. So then, here's my next question. What do we need in order to have personal moral agents? There could be several things, but I know of at least one necessary condition, and that is, I believe, free will. Let me illustrate it to you this way. Let's modify the illustration just a little bit. So we have the car and the mechanic. Now let's put in a third party in here. Let's say there's this mad scientist whose evil purposes are unknown to us. He wants to do this twisted social experiment. So what he does is he breaks into the mechanic's shop, knocks him out, and rigs his brain such that from a distance, at the press of a button, he can take over the mechanic and do things through him. So that's exactly what he does. The mechanic doesn't know what just happened, and the mad scientist goes away somewhere and presses the button and takes over the mechanic and uses the faulty brake parts to repair the car. Now, if the police had that piece of information, now who do you think they will arrest? The mad scientist. Why is that? Because he is the causal agent that started the chain of events that would ultimately lead to the death of the toddler. We need free will in order to have personal moral agents. So let me give you a halfway summary because that's a lot of stuff. So we see that objective morality requires a transcendent standard, a standard that's outside of us. Given that morality is the kind of thing, though, that is founded on personhood, personal moral agents, its source has also to be personal. So then we ultimately arrive at a personal being that is outside of humanity, so we have this. There must be a transcendent and personal source for morality. Now, with that in mind, then let's move to the second part of this talk. How about atheism? how might atheism make sense of objective morality? Now, to the question, without God, does objective morality exist? Many philosophers, atheistic philosophers in the past, answered that question in the negative. They said, no, objective morality does not exist without God. So some have said that it's just a matter of command, right? So when you say murder is evil, what you're really saying is don't murder. It's that whole scenario where moral value is missing and it's just all a matter of obligation. Nothing is good or evil. It's like that, they said. Other atheistic philosophers have argued that it's just the way we use our language. Morality doesn't exist, but we use the kind of moral language. Still others have said that morality is just a way of expressing our preference. So when you say rape is evil, what you're really saying is rape. Ugh. That's all it is. It's just your preference. These days, though, a lot of atheists will argue, actually, there is objective morality and you don't need God for it. So where do they pin their morality? Well, some have pinned it on sociobiological adaptation. It's just empathy, or it's reason, or it's utility. But really, can atheism make sense of objective morality? I would actually contend no. So we can all go home, because that's the end of my talk. No, let me hash that out with you. Now, can atheism actually account for objective morality? It depends on their view of the world. Many atheists are also naturalists. They hold to naturalism. What is naturalism? Naturalism is the idea, is the belief, that our universe can be exhaustively described with some ideal form of physics. It's the belief that our universe can be exhaustively described with some ideal form of physics. Simply put, all we have in our world at the end of the day, at the bottom of it all, are particles in motion. That's all we have. So let's think about this then. What does this do to value, duty, and justice? When it comes to value, I like to use this illustration. Let's say we have two dominoes, domino A and domino B. We have at least two possible scenarios here. One is domino A falls over and knocks domino B over. Number two is the opposite. Domino B falls and knocks domino A over. Question, which one of these two scenarios is evil? Yeah, some of you are chuckling, right? Because, the question is absurd. Neither is evil. It's just blind physics. Blind physics. There's nothing good or evil about it. It's a morally neutral event. What about if we had 100 dominoes? Does that change anything? No, it's just more of the same, right? More of the same kind of physics. What about if we had 1 billion, trillion dominoes? Does that change anything? No, more of the same physics. What if we had 10 to the 80th power dominoes? No, it's more of the same. By the way, scientists tell us that 10 to the 80th power is the number of elementary particles that we have in our universe. Okay? So in the same way, just by multiplying the number of dominoes, you can't arrive at moral value, good and evil. In the same way, just because we have particles in motion all colliding into each other, doesn't mean we can get something like moral value out of this. It's just all particles colliding. I am just at the mercy of the trajectory of these particles started by the Big Bang. I'm not responsible for what I do. It's just the particles moving. So moral value then is missing. Naturalism cannot account for it. Atheistic naturalism. What about duty? Remember I said earlier that duty is something you owe to other personal moral agents, other persons. In order to have personal moral agents, we need free will. Now, if naturalism is true and everything is just particles in motion, okay, just as it's just blind physics, we don't have free will. It's just one particle colliding into the next, colliding into the next, colliding into the next, and on it goes. We have no free will. And if we have no free will, we don't have personal moral agents. And if we don't have personal moral agents, we can't make sense of duty. What about justice? Again, let's say this court summons Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler. And the judge says, okay, death sentence for the both of you. I mean, we already saw earlier that this is just nonsense, right? This is absurd. But in the court of naturalism, that's exactly what happens. It doesn't matter how you live your life. At the end of the day, you're going to die and be eaten by worms. That's the end of you. Right? Oh, maybe we can, with technology, we can really make people live, gain immortality. What about then? Okay, let's think about this. Scientists are telling us that our sun is dying, and as it dies, it's going to expand, so much so that it's going to swallow up the earth. Everything is going to be burnt to crisp, gone. Or maybe we can escape to another planet in another galaxy and colonize it and live on. But even then, the second law of thermodynamics tells us that our universe is actually running out of usable energy. Just like a car is running on a tank of fuel, we're running out of that fuel. And at the end of the day, or at the end of our history, everything is going to come to a grinding halt. There's going to be no movement, no light, nothing but cosmic junkyard. That is what cosmology is telling us. That's how we're going to end up. Doesn't matter which galaxy you go to, that's going to be your fate. In the court of naturalism, everybody gets death sentence, period. So then where does this leave atheism with respect to objective morality? I would actually say you can't have objective morality, just like I showed you just now. So what's the best option that they've got? Now, I've looked at different ethical theories like the social contract theory, utilitarianism, and all of these things. It seems to me that everything just really boils down to moral relativism. It's just relative to each other. So there are two kinds of moral relativism. One is called moral subjectivism. This is the view that says it is up to each individual to determine what's right or wrong, good or evil. There's another form called cultural relativism, and this is the view that each culture or society gets to determine what is right, what is wrong, what is good, and what is evil. So let's look at moral subjectivism. If moral subjectivism is true, that is, if each individual person can determine what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is evil, then how do we justifiably condemn somebody like Ted Bundy, the notorious serial killer and rapist from back in the 1970s? And then he was eventually arrested and he received a death sentence and he died at the Florida State Prison in 1989. It's just personal preference, right? It's just all relative to each individual. So I actually have a quote from Ted Bundy. So let's take a little journey into the mind of a twisted rapist and serial killer here. Apparently this was taken from a recording when Ted Bundy was talking to one of his victims before he killed her. And this is what he said. Then I learned that all moral judgments are value judgments, that all value judgments are subjective, and that none can be proved to be either right or wrong. I even read somewhere that the Chief Justice of the United States had written that the American Constitution expressed nothing more than collective value judgments. Believe it or not, I figured out for myself what apparently the Chief Justice couldn't figure out for himself, that if the rationality of one value judgment was 0, multiplying it by millions would not make it one whit more rational. Nor is there any reason to obey the law anymore. Like myself, let me read that again. Nor is there any reason to obey the law for anyone like myself who has the boldness and daring, the strength of character to throw off its shackles. I discovered that to become truly free, truly unfettered, I had to become truly uninhibited. And I quickly discovered that the greatest obstacle to my freedom, the greatest block and limitation to it, consists in the insupportable value judgment that I was bound to respect the rights of others. I asked myself, who were these others? Other human beings with human rights? Why is it more wrong to kill a human animal than any other animal? A pig, or a sheep, or a steer? Is your life more to you than a hog's life is to a hog? Why should I be willing to sacrifice my pleasure more for the one than for the other? Surely you would not, in this day of scientific enlightenment, declare that God or nature has marked some pleasures as moral or good and others as immoral or bad. In any case, let me assure you, my dear young lady, that there is absolutely no comparison between the pleasure I might take in eating ham and the pleasure I anticipate in raping and murdering you. That is the honest conclusion to which my education has led me, after the most conscientious examination of my spontaneous and uninhibited self. If everybody gets to determine for himself or herself what's right or wrong, how do we justifiably condemn somebody like Ted Bundy? It's just all preference. It's his preference against the preference of the victim. Obviously, this is absurd, and I think many atheists recognize this. So they will punt to something else, cultural relativism. See, but really, cultural relativism doesn't solve the problems inherent in moral subjectivism. Really, you're just kicking the can down the road. The problem is still there. Now, instead of personal preference, we have moved on to group preference. Right? Whatever the culture decides is sovereign. So then, how can we justifiably condemn what Unit 731 did? How can we justifiably condemn what Nazi Germany did? Or the Rwandan genocide? Here's another problem with cultural relativism. According to cultural relativism, because what the culture decides, what the society decides is sovereign, social reformers are by definition evil. Let me give you some examples. What about Martin Luther King Jr., who fought against institutionalized racism in the United States? What about William Wilberforce, who abolished slavery in the British Empire? What about Mother Teresa, who worked and cared for the destitute in Calcutta? By definition, they're all evil because they went against what the culture had decided. If the culture says slavery is the thing to do, to go against that would be evil. That's where cultural relativism leads you. Here's another problem with cultural relativism. Who gets to call the shots? Who gets to call the shots? Because a culture is not just a monolithic thing, right? There are a lot of other subcultures within it. As Christians, we are a subculture within the larger tapestry of Canada. Just think about your high school, right? You have your jocks over here, you have your popular girls over here, right? And then there's the band geeks, hello, right? And then there's the ESL students, that's me too. Who gets to call the shots? And often, what the societal elites think doesn't necessarily reflect what the majority think, right? I mean, I think we've seen that in the US politics lately. I'm not going to go into that because it doesn't matter which side I take, I lose like half of you. So let's just think with me for a moment here. God either exists or doesn't exist. There's no middle ground. He either exists or doesn't exist. Okay? And we have seen that atheistic naturalism cannot really take account for objective morality. And morality being the kind of thing that it is, we need a transcendent personal being, transcendent personal source. So theism actually makes much better sense given the kind of universe that we're living in. We all experience objective morality. And by the way, if somebody denies that morality is objective, the only thing that you have to do to be convinced of the reality of objective morality is to be on the receiving end of some evil act. Then you know very quickly that morality is not subjective. It's very much objective. So here's the final summary then. For us to account for objective morality, which we seem to be all experiencing, we have to posit a standard outside of humanity that's also personal. That's consistent with theism. And atheism, on the other hand, can't account for objective morality, and so this creates a negative case for God's existence. So, insofar as we experience objective morality, we are rational in affirming the existence of God. Now, as I wrap up, I just want to leave you with one thought. I think if we're honest, as Christians, many of us are a little bit embarrassed about the church. I mean, you look through the history, right? We've done a lot of terrible things. I think we need to admit that. So when I talk to my friends who are not Christian, often they'll bring up stuff like the Salem witch trials or the Spanish Inquisition or the Crusades. By the way, I had a chance to actually study the Crusades a little bit while I was in school. And let me tell you, a lot of what we know about the Crusades is not true. So if you want to learn more about that, I actually have an episode on our podcast where I go a little bit more into detail, so you can check that out. But you know, yes, the church has done some terrible things, but the church has also done some wonderful things. What might those be? When the secular Roman society was abandoning their children, just throwing them into trash heaps if they didn't like them, guess who took them in? It was the Christians. I mean, Christians were the original social justice warriors. What about the university? They started as cathedral schools in medieval Europe. Human rights came from the idea that every individual is made in the image of God. What about modern science? Modern science came from Christianized Europe and nowhere else. So when your friends tell you that science and religion, they're like this, don't buy it. It was their faith that drove the scientific pursuit of the scientific revolutionaries in the 1600s and 1500s. And lastly, Christianity has something very valuable to bring to the table, because it is under Christianity that we can actually make sense of objective morality. See, Buddhism tells you that this is just all an illusion. You don't exist. Yourself, the sense of self, is an illusion. And when you die, that's it. When you come back, it's not you that's coming back, it's just karma. It's not you. You don't even exist in the first place anyway. Right? Atheism, we saw, can't make sense of objective morality either. And I would even argue that even on Islam, objective morality doesn't make a whole lot of sense, in the sense that morality is an interpersonal thing, but if God is just a single person, how can he be the source of objective morality? But we have the Trinity, so morality actually makes sense. So I just want you to be encouraged and be proud of your heritage. Be proud of the church. I love the church. It's flawed. Yes, it's flawed, but I love the church. It's my spiritual family. And I'm so looking forward to the day when we will all find ourselves in the presence of the Lord and we'll have eternity to get to know each other. I only have a few hours here and there to get to know you, but I will have eternity to get to know you all, and all of us get to know each other. And I'm really looking forward to it, and that's the kind of hope that we have. And we have something very beautiful that we can offer to this world that's hurting for truth and hope. With that said, thank you so much for having me here. Again, the book is in the back if you want to purchase a copy. Thank you so much for having me here. I always wanted to stay in Winnipeg for a couple days because I only went through here once way before, so it's been really neat to get to know you a little bit. Your license plate says Friendly Manitoba. You guys are not kidding. So thank you so much for your hospitality. God bless you.
Yeah, Steve, it's been a rich weekend, and thank you so much. You know, just about every week we open the Bible and we teach straight out of the Bible. And you've noticed that the apologetics series isn't so open the Bible. And one of the reasons for that is because when it comes to some of these tough questions, most of us just go, well, the Bible tells me so. That doesn't work when it comes to apologetics. And that's why I love the fact that we've been stretched with logic and philosophy and science, and we're digging in and we're finding out there's a whole realm of truth, even around the Bible, that just affirms God and God's truth, which has been so rich. Hey, over at the warehouse, you guys have potluck next week. Make sure you bring a pile of food. It's going to be a great experience. I'm going to say goodbye to the warehouse and to the fire hall right now. Have a great week.